This is Tome-bound Warlock. I'm coming at you with a new, kind of a different take on a deck tech today. I decided to make a video explaining my process for Chaos Commander, diving into it a little deeper and talking about the specific rules and guidelines that I use to help me create random decks with the things that I've created. So Chaos Commander is something I invented myself, just based off of inspiration from Roll for Sandwich. If you've never seen Roll for Sandwich, really fun channel where he makes a bunch of crazy sandwiches based on RNG and dice rolling. So I thought, hey, maybe I could take that and change it and adapt it for Commander, because Commander is something I'm really passionate about. So that's where this came from. All right, so this is the table I created for Chaos Commander. The philosophy behind this for me is to find a fun new way to create decks, because as a Magic player, you go through phases of, deck building and what you want from a deck and the kind of Commander games that you want to have. And when I first started playing Commander, I was very excited about high power, efficient, hyper efficient decks, almost CEDH before CEDH was even I regret that. But part of the reason I decided to make this was so that other people didn't have those experiences, right? So, there's this fine line we ride. We want to build a deck that's really efficient and strong, that wins, because, it's a game, you want to try and win. But on the other side of it is, like, if no one's having fun when you're trying to win, is it worth playing? If people just give up, or they're just like, okay, that's great, man, you won, but I never want to play with you again. So, Chaos Commander was born. And following the rules here, basically, we have our 4 categories. One is colors. We roll to determine the color identity for the commander. And then we roll to determine the theme of the deck. 3 is chaos, roll for random deck restrictions and changes, and then the last one obviously is you choose your commander based on those results. So I decided to go with a backwards deck build I designed for this because, anyone can randomly choose a commander and build a random deck around it, and that's fine. You can do it that way. The other reason was there are like a million different commanders now, thousands and upon thousands of legendary creatures, and it was a lot to sift through, and I was kind of like brainstorming, and I was like, okay, there's no way I can RNG a million different commanders just based on the name of the commander. Even splitting them into specific colors was a little tough to just get a random generator going, at least for me. So what I did is I kind of went backwards. I decided, okay, what are the things that we can decide on in the beginning, and from there we could go backwards and kind of backwards engineer the deck to fit whatever commander we want. So it's this balance of, we have the chaos from the dice rolling and the categories that we roll for, but we still have creative control over what the commander is or does, depending on the chaos table, of course. So let's look at this a little bit. So colors, obviously I've divided all the color pairings into categories. Mono, 2, 3, and 4 and 5 I kept together. Depending on what you roll up here, depends on what you get down here. And then there's some chaos rolls throughout. So if you roll 1 on the mono table, chaos you re-roll on the color table, which is this. So you might even have to go back and re-roll what your colors are in general. For the 4 and 5 table, we have chaos. You might get a colorless commander, or you might get to choose. I get to choose whatever colors I want if I get, a 4 on the colors table and an 8 on the 4 to 5 table. So there's my random generation for colors. Once we have our color pairing, we can take a look at the themes, and these are the themes I have right now. I thought about changing them up later to give a little more variety. Maybe once we've gone through these a few dozen times, I'll start switching things up. But for now, this is what we've got. I kind of just chose the main themes in Commander that I see, the ones that are pretty popular or that have a lot of support. So like tokens, artifacts, life gain, graveyard matters, aggro decks, kindred decks. Those are all themes that are very accessible in multiple colors. So those are what I went with. The chaos table. So for chaos, it imposes either deck restrictions or deck changes that you might be forced to make at this point in your deck building journey. So let's say that we've gone through and re-rolled a mono blue deck, and it's going to be a mono blue +1/+1 counters deck, which would be a kind of a tricky theme to build on. But maybe we roll on the chaos table and oops, we have all creatures in our deck now. So now we have blue, mono blue with counters, and we can't use anything other than creatures in the deck. That's going to be pretty challenging to build. And the fun part about this for me is it gives me some restrictions that are pretty limiting, but it lets me be creative in the way of like, okay, yeah, I have a lot of limits, but how can I break through those limits and make a deck that functions regardless? And for me, that's really cool and really fun. And maybe some people are like, oh, well, that's not an optimized deck. That's not going to play well and blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, yeah, okay, it's not going to be a tier 4 deck or anything. It's not going to be a competitive deck that you would take to a tournament or anything. But to be honest, from what I've seen in my experiences and what I experience when I go and play Commander is 90% or 95% even percent of the games I play are casual Commander. And, keep in mind, I don't go to competitions. I don't go to, Commander tournaments very often anymore. I used to a little bit, but don't let that dissuade you from thinking that a deck can't be good, because some of the most fun I have in Commander is playing decks that are in a cool theme that I love, and even though the deck might not be hyper focused and, the most efficient deck I could possibly build, it's still really fun, and it's fun not just for me, but for my opponents that play against me, and it makes for interactive games and fun gameplay, which is what we all want at the end of the day. Some different chaos results here. All possible MDFCs, so it forces you to put all of your MDFCs that you can into the deck. The thing about chaos is, like, if you can't legally build a deck with whatever restrictions or changes that it's forcing you to make, then just roll again. Like, your deck still needs to be legal in the Commander format. And then finally, once you've gone through all of those things, you have enough data to go to wherever you choose your commanders, or go to a database that has commanders listed. I use EDHREC, and then I just go there and look at my color pairing and decide which commander I want. So for example, in this scenario, we had mono blue, and we have +1/+1 counter theme, and I don't know, let's say our chaos was oops, all creatures. Well, we can look at the mono blue options at our disposal. We're going to want to avoid commanders that deal with instants and sorceries, because we won't have access to those. And we want something that could benefit from counters, +1/+1 counters. So something you could do is you could choose something like Tekuthal, because he can let you proliferate, which is going to get you more out of your counters. Because in mono blue, there aren't that many +1/+1 counter synergies just in mono blue alone. There's some, but you got to be strategic about what your commander does and if it's going to be helpful to that theme. That's the fun part for me with the Chaos Commanders. It flexes those creative muscles and lets me kind of figure out the puzzle. So we could do Tekuthal as an option. Another option that could be good is Geralf, the Fleshright. When you cast a spell during your turn other than your first spell, you make a zombie, and when the zombie enters, you can put a counter on it for each other zombie that entered the battlefield. So this doesn't say instant and sorcery, it says when you cast a spell. Creatures are spells. So that could be some kind of weird creature storm deck. That could be kind of fun, actually. Another option we have is Neardiv, Devious Diver. When she becomes tapped, you make a player mill equal to her power. When you cast a spell from your graveyard or activate an ability of a card in your graveyard, draw a card, put a 1 counter on her. So she gives herself counters, draws you cards. The tough piece with her would be figuring out cards in mono blue that let you play from your graveyard, and flashback is a thing, so you could do some kind of flashback +1/+1 counter deck. I'm just kind of spitballing, brainstorming. But these are some options. So let's say we want to do Geralf. I kind of like that idea of a Geralf zombie +1/+1 counter deck. So what I do is I'll go here and I'll look at the tags. And tags are really great because it gives you a database of some players who have built decks on a specific tag or a specific theme. So what I'll usually do is I'll say, okay, our theme is +1/+1 counters, and this is our commander, Geralf. And then now I have a list of cards to start with and to look at. Another good place to find a card database, Scryfall is another good one if you're looking for, just what cards are out there for me to use and to build with. And then you build a deck. And I might actually build this deck now because it looks really fun. So give me a second. I'm going to get it thrown together for you, and then we'll talk about it. And just like that, everyone, with the magic of editing, we have completed the deck. This is Mono Blue Zombie Encounters deck. Just building this off of our example from our hypothetical Chaos Commander role. This is just one of many options or variable decks you could build. And this one is super fun, actually. The best thing I think that I like about Chaos Commander is how many unique decks you can actually build. You'll show up to your LGS or your play group and sit down. You bring out this Chaos Commander deck that you rolled up that's just absolutely out of left field. No one's gonna sit down with you and expect a mono blue +1/+1 counter zombie deck. Like, that just is such a weird deck build option, but that's the beauty of it. That's the fun of it, is how good can you get that weird chaos deck or jank deck to work. So this one, just to give you kind of a rundown, what I did was I went to EDHREC and I searched through the commanders that I thought would be cool. I decided on Geralf the Fleshright. Another option that I found while I was deck building was Jason Bright, Glowing Prophet. So if you're a Fallout fan and you want to run this guy as the commander for this weird chaos deck, that would be really fitting because this guy is very strange and chaotic himself. So that could be a fun option for you. So just to break the deck down a little bit, I listed him as a backup commander just for the sake of these guys could be interchangeable. For now, we're going to base it off Geralf. What I did was I picked as many +1/+1 counter synergistic cards as I could find with just creatures, because creature only was our restriction. And I did allow for creature artifacts, so anything that had creature in the name I counted as fair game. So for example, the reality chip is fair game because it is a creature, even though it is also an artifact and an equipment. As long as it has that creature text, it's good to go. Same thing with Silent Hall Creeper. It's a creature, an enchantment creature, but it is still a creature, so it's fair game. Metallic Mimic, same thing. It's an artifact creature. You get the picture. Let's break this down a little bit. So, card draw pieces. As I went through, I found anything that I thought would be synergistic, so +1/+1 counters, and I tried to stick with things that were zombies, just to stick with kind of the commander synergy, which is the creative part of this deck for me. Is this wasn't part of our restrictions. It didn't have to be a kindred zombie deck or anything, but that's something I decided to throw in because it kind of fit the +1/+1 counter theme we were going for with the commander, and it's kind of fun. So we've got draw cards, Bethnic Biomancer. It has Adept 1 for 2 mana. When one or more counters are put onto it, draw a card, then discard a card. So when we're putting counters on with our proliferate things, you can pay to put one counter on it, and then later proliferate more to draw cards and loot. You can play this as part of a storm count for your commander to generate zombies, and then later exile it to draw a card. 4 mana for a card is not great, but it fits with our theme, and it gets us a little bit of value later. Curiosity Crafter is great. You'll make a lot of zombies, and when those zombies hit, you're going to draw cards. Danny Pink is also good for that. When you have counters placed onto creatures for the first time each turn, you draw a card. Eternal of Harsh Truths, it's a zombie, it draws us cards, and it has Afflict. I thought it kind of just fit the theme, and it gives us card draw. You'll find you can't be too picky with these Chaos Brews. Anything that draws cards that fits your theme is probably something you want to use. Fibblethip lets us look at the top card and plot creatures from our library to play later for free, which adds to Geralf's storm count. I thought that was a good synergy piece. Forgotten Creation, it's a zombie, lets you discard your cards in your hand to draw that many cards, so it's a nice wheel effect for us. Hordewing Scab gives our zombies evasion once we've got counters on them. We have Ledger Shredder here, just it gives itself counters through the connive triggers potentially, and is a nice flying beater. It's not a zombie, but it's a good draw piece in the deck. Organ Hoarder, look at the top 3 cards, put them in your hand, rest into your graveyard. When you have a creature restriction on a deck, your goal is to find creatures that sort of act like spells. So this card is very similar to some loot effects. Yeah, it costs 4 mana, okay, but on a restriction, we can't be too picky, and it fits our theme. Piper, when you sack a clue, you get a counter on a target creature, so when she deals damage to players, you get to put that many clues into play. So nice low drop creature, you can play her, it'll get your storm count up for your commander, and then you can go ahead and start sacking clues to put counters on other creatures. Polywog Prodigy is just a crazy good card. When an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than Polywog Prodigy's power, you draw a card. You're going to get a lot of cards off this guy, plus he has Evolve, so when you play zombies or other creatures, he's going to get counters from them. Self Entomber I didn't know was a thing, but a decent looter for what we want. It's a zombie, so it kind of fits the theme. Silent Hall Creeper, it puts counters on itself, so it synergizes with some of our proliferate pieces in the game plan category. And then Reality Chip, just getting value from the top of our deck. Normally when I make deck techs, I put everything into different categories based on the Command Zone deck building guide. This one, just for the sake of time, I just threw all the synergy pieces into one pile, and we're just going to go through them really quick. I won't stop too much, but let's see what we got. We got Aven Eternal, Bloodline Pretender, Chasm Skulker, synergy pieces with +1/+1 counters. Cleaver Scab lets us copy some zombies. Crashing Drawbridge gives those zombie tokens haste. Deep Glow Skate pumps up our zombies out of nowhere that already have counters on them. Dreadnought Thief, we get to look at the top card of a player's library, put that card into their graveyard. This one's just in here because it's a zombie that's 3 cost, relatively easy to get some zombies into play with Geralf through him. Dreamtide Whale, really good proliferate piece for a counters deck. Eternal Skylord makes us zombies, amasses that puts counters on the zombie. Falcon Abomination. Geralf Visionary Stitcher, he gives our zombies flying, and we can sack non-token creatures to make XX zombies, where X is the creature's toughness. Goldberry River Daughter from Lord of the Rings. You can manipulate counters and move them around onto our permanents and let us draw a little bit from those. Guildpact Informant, when it deals damage to a player, you proliferate, or a planeswalker. Heavengold Runebinder, this guy seems like a sleeper in the deck. Exile a creature from your graveyard, make a zombie token, and then put a counter on each zombie creature you control. So he pumps up all of our zombies. Yeah, you gotta pay a little bit into it, but hey, it could be fun and synergistic in the deck. Herald of Secret Streams, creatures with counters on them can't be blocked. A good way to give evasion to our zombies. Larder Zombie, tap some zombies, look at the top card of your library, you can put it in your graveyard, so connive on a zombie. Metallic Mimic pumps up our zombies, puts counters on them when they come in. Min is in here for some extra value. When you draw your second card each turn from one of our draw effects, you'll get to make an illusion, and when they die, you get to put permanents into play. Mana value less than or equal to the creature's power from your hand. Just a value piece. You could probably cut this or something else. Nadir, same thing. He puts counters on himself when we draw cards if you pay a mana, and then he makes tentacle tokens. So a little not synergistic with the deck, but it puts counters on things. You could probably cut it for something else. Outlaw Stitcher is pretty cool. He synergizes with the deck really well. When he enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature token, then put 2/1/1 counters on that token for each spell you've cast other than the first this turn. And he has plot, so you can plot him, play him a bunch of spells, play him for free, get a 2/2 zombie with a bunch of counters on it. Big beater zombie that maybe has flying from one of our other value pieces. Patchwork Crawler. Riku, Resourceful Guardian. This one is from the Final Fantasy set, and it does a really great job at putting counters on things. And when you do, you get to make them can't be blocked by creatures your opponents control, so they get like pseudo unblockable. And then you can pay a mana tapper, move a counter from target creature an opponent controls onto target creature you control. So you can kind of steal counters from your opponent's things, which is kind of fun. Roaming Throne is a non-bow in this deck. It's just so good. You get extra triggers from your commander and all the other zombies in the deck. Screeching Scab, when he enters, mill 2. Not a big deal. He's in here because he's a cheap zombie that can get our commander going. Shrieking Drake, when it enters the battlefield, return a creature you control to your owner's hand. So you can play this and get a zombie back to your hand and then replay it to get more zombie casting triggers. Spark Double, copy your best thing and play. Stitch Assistant, when it exploits a creature, scry 1, draw a card, so we can sack some of our zombies to get a little more value. And actually, he could be in the draw category. Stonecoil Serpent, this could probably be replaced with something else, but it has counters placed on it when it comes in, so it's synergistic with the deck. Tekkathal, crazy good if you proliferate twice. We have a few creatures in the deck that proliferate, so it's a good thing to have. Plus, we have limited counter placement in mono blue, so the more value we can get out of those cards from proliferating them is great. The Flood of Mars, this card's really cool. I didn't know existed. It's from the Doctor Who set. 4-drop alien zombie horror 3/3. He has Island Walk, and water always wins. Whenever the Flood of Mars attacks, put a flood counter on another target creature or land. If it's a creature, it becomes a copy of the Flood of Mars. If it's a land, it becomes an island. So you could turn your opponent's lands into islands, maybe add some Island Walk synergy in the deck, or what I would do is just make other copies of the Flood of Mars and do a little bit of both. Put a counter on your opponent's land, make a bunch of Flood of Mars copies, and swing in for unblockable. Thrumming Bird proliferates when we deal damage to an opponent. Toothy's really good. When you draw, you put counters on him. When he leaves, you draw a card for each counter on him. Very good +1/+1 counter synergy in the deck. I'd also probably put him in the card draw section. 20-toed Toad, probably another card draw piece, but when you attack with 2 or more creatures, put a counter on him and draw a card. When he attacks, you win the game if there are 20 or more counters on him, or you have 20 or more cards in hand. So again, card draw piece, but he sets your max hand size to 20, which lets you keep all those cards you're drawing, and then potentially an extra win con. Lastly, Undead Alchemist. This is my favorite card in Magic because it's such a cool card. When I first discovered it, I was really excited about it. And when I first got into Magic, I built a 60-card blue-black zombie deck that was not super good at all, but it was super fun with this guy at the helm. If a zombie you control would deal combat damage to a player, instead they mill that many cards. And then when they mill creatures, you get to exile those creatures, and you make 2/2 zombie tokens. So really fun, like side mill, like surprise mill strategy. You know, you don't want to keep him in play forever, but he's a good way to get zombie bodies on the board, and then when you don't need him anymore, sacrifice him to one of your exploit creatures, and then swing in and deal a bunch of damage. Really fun. That's the bulk of the deck, honestly, is the counters and the game plan cards and the drawing. Lands, super easy land base. You don't even need these extra lands that I put in. You could honestly just run, 38 islands. I am running 1 MDFC. It is a creature, so it is legal. 1/4 with Flash. It's Hydroelectric Specimen. When it enters the battlefield, you may change the target of target instant or sorcery spell with a single target to Hydroelectric Specimen. So he's kind of a pseudo counterspell on a creature body, which is decent because we don't have access to counterspells due to our chaos restriction. Some ramp, we have Cloud of Fairies. He just comes in, lets us untap some stuff. He lets us have trigger our commander because it would be the second. He would be the first spell, and then we untap our lands and can play another spell to trigger our commander. Cryptolith Trilobite. This card would be better with Jason Bright at the helm, so he's a potential cut, but he enters with X1/1 counters, XX Trilobite, and remove a 1/1 counter from Cryptic Trilobite, add 2 colorless, spend that mana only to activate abilities. He can also pay 1 and tap him to put a counter on him. Crystalline Crawlers are really good ramp card for counter decks. So he enters with counters on him for each color of mana spent to cast. So he only enters with one, but if you're proliferating every turn, you'll get more counters on him, and then you can remove those counters later. Plus, he can put counters on himself, and then you can remove those counters later to add mana to your mana pool. So decent. Fate Stitcher, untap and tap different permanents, and he has Unearth. So if he dies, we can play him for cheap, which triggers our Giralf as an extra spell, and then untap lands or whatever we would like. So I realize we have Karfell Harbinger in the deck. You could probably cut this for something else. I would, but I put it in here because it's a zombie. We can't really use the tap ability because we don't have foretell cards or instants or sorceries, but it's a cheap creature that we can have as our first spell for turn and then play something else to get a Giralf trigger. So not the greatest pick, but you know, it can help us get to where we need to go. And then Silvermere, mana rock creature for 2 mana. I tried to keep low-cost creatures in this deck just to help with casting spells, more than one spell on your turn to get more zombies. And then lastly, we have our removal, Diver Scab, Overcharged Amalgam. This is a pseudo-counterspell creature in the deck. Simic Manipulator. If you remove counters from him, you can gain control of creatures your opponents control, so it's like pseudo-removal. Stitch Mangler can tap a creature an opponent controls. It doesn't untap, so it's like temporary removal, but it's a zombie and it's a 3-drop, so it's not super mana intensive in the later game. And then Walking Ballista, if you need a little bit of extra ping removal, you can keep proliferating him, remove small creatures that your opponents have. And yeah, so that's the deck. This one I brewed up in like, I don't know how long it's been, 20 minutes maybe. I think it could be a really cool deck. Giralf seems like a fun commander and he's one that I've wanted to try and play test. Maybe I'll take this deck out for a spin on Goldfish it and see how it does. But this would be my end result, and I'm gonna have a link to this deck list in the description of the video. So keep an eye out for that. But that is kind of the whole breakdown of Chaos Commander. I hope you enjoyed my breakdown, and I hope you go out and try some Chaos Commander of your own. Feel free to use the table that I have. If you'd like to change it up, mix it up, feel free to get creative and build decks that are going to be bring a little chaos into your Magic games. But thank you again for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great day.